Amber Case. She studies the interaction between humans and computers and how our relationship with information is changing the way cultures think, act, and understand their worlds. Case is currently a fellow at Harvard University's Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society and a visiting researcher at the MIT Center for Civic Media. A TED speaker and author, her TED talk, "We Are All Cyborgs Now." I'm not yet, but soon I'll be. "We're All Cyborgs Now" has been viewed over 1 million times. And not as intimate a contact to Finland as Dr. Rega, but I asked her, she has roots in Holland, so that's close enough. Let's take her home as well. Please welcome Tame Your Raging Business with calm technology, Amber Case.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I have wanted to visit this place for a long time. I used so much of the research from Finnish researchers from Nokia in my thesis. It was very exciting. So I'd like to tell you about calm technology and how I came to find this phrase and what it means to me and what it means to the Internet of Things. Who's seen this quote that there will be 50 billion devices online by 2020? Usually there's these quotes that get thrown around, and oftentimes we think that the more technology we throw at something, the better it will be. At some point, if we have enough technology, then the world's problems will be solved. And I like to question this. I like to think, does this actually sound good or not? Consider different things that we already have right now. Like we have the smart watch that automatically sends the same notifications you would get on your phone to your wrist. We have the smart fridge. I've talked to so many innovative companies that have said, we want to make a smart fridge that locks people out if they eat too many sweets. And I say, well, I don't have a smart cupboard. I can just go to my cupboard and eat all the sweets that I want. I don't have to worry about it. Or the idea that it would lock you out and you could get access to it if you had a payment plan and you had a profile, and then you would use your thumbprint to enter the fridge. And I thought, well, when I'm cooking, my hands are really dirty, so then I wouldn't be able to enter my fridge anymore. Not to mention that these can be taken over and DDoS attack the web. Also, the issue is that you often have these update cycles where a smart fridge isn't necessarily secure. I thought that maybe we need smarter humans instead of smarter technology. It would be nice to have the opposite. When you put all of this together with different teams, different programming languages, different update cycles, and different threat models, you get what I like to call the dystopian kitchen of the future, in which nothing makes any sense, nothing's made by any of the same manufacturers. Some of the things are made by startups that will go out of business in 2 to 3 years. And hopefully, you don't sell your house and somebody has to inherit all of these technologies that don't make any sense. I don't think that people should have to be a system administrator to live in their own home. But we have a kind of interruptive technology right now. It's okay to make fun of scenarios in which your light bulbs can attack the internet. But when you actually have real people connected to these devices that have to rely on them, we can't rely on connectivity like we would electricity. If electricity were as reliable as the web right now, then the lights in this auditorium would be flickering every once in a while. It wouldn't be perfect all the time. We wouldn't have strong lighting at all. It would just kind of go out. There would be too many things going on. So I like to give this example of, there's a startup called petnet.io, and the promise behind this startup is that it will automatically allow you to feed and water your cats and dogs remotely, and you can Skype them, you can see them in real time when you're gone, so you can say hello to your pets. Now, there are things that can go wrong with this. Usually an automated pet feeder is set up on a timer, and it just releases a certain amount of pet food and water every day or a couple times a day for your pet. But this is on a server remotely. And so, of course, what happened, as you could probably guess, is that the server went down and these pets got stranded. And because the customer was promised that they could have their pets remote and take care of them, and that their pets would be okay. They didn't give anybody a key to their house to get in. They didn't have a backup plan like they usually would when you have somebody cat sitting or dog sitting. So I kind of call this the new Schrodinger's cat. People didn't know whether their pets were alive or dead, yet they were promised that they could have some ease of life experience by using this new technology. So then I looked into the terms of service. I said, all right, is the company liable for this, or is the customer liable for this? Who is liable, and are there any regulations around what this even means? Because if this was with real people instead of just pets, there would be lawsuits. People could die. So I looked, and it says, sorry, we're not held liable for any dead animals if our server goes down. Now, they could have made this a little bit better. They could have said, okay, our server is down, so you can't Skype your animals anymore. But there's still an automated feeding system that's on that doesn't rely on a server to do it. The question is, when your technology fails, how much does it fail? If you get a cold as a human, you don't die. If the server goes down for this system, it shouldn't die completely. When an escalator breaks down, it turns into stairs. Can it kind of degrade in certain levels so that you can still make sure that the pets are getting fed even if you can't talk to them over video? This is the question. So we have this era of interruptive technology. Not only are the connections interruptible, but our own lives are getting interrupted. How many of you have too many notifications on your phones that don't make a lot of sense, that you're annoyed with all of the time? How many of you have too many emails that you can't handle? How many of you hold your breath when you check your email? How many of you have even checked if you hold your breath while you check your email? There's actually a thing called email apnea, where it's been shown that people go and they sit in front of their email because in nature, it's the equivalent of a bunch of animals in a forest being diametrically opposed to you, about to attack you, and you just freeze up, or you run away, but you can't run away from email. It's always there. So what's the opposite of an interruptive technology? We need a calm technology. So I found this while I was working on my thesis on mobile phones in 2007, and I found these two people, Mark Weiser and John Seeley Brown, from Xerox PARC. And in the mid-'80s and '90s, they created this whole group of ubiquitous computing elements. They had this world of pads, tabs, and boards. They said, at some point in the future, we'll have many connected things, and they prototyped it using millions of dollars of research funding from this research institute. And what they found is that the scarce resource in the 21st century wasn't technology. The scarce resource was our attention. They didn't have any bandwidth left to even think about anything because they were so overwhelmed by all of these devices, trying to interact with them and give them updates all the time. And so they wrote a paper called The Coming Age of Calm Technology. They said early on, there were many people sharing one big mainframe computer. And then as we got into the desktop era, there were a few people per desktop. And then we'll get into the mobile era, because this was kind of early mobile. And they said, we'll have maybe a few devices per person. And then in the era of ubiquitous computing, which we now know as Internet of Things, there will be many devices sharing one person. And that is when our attention will start to be the most valuable resource that we'll try to conserve. So how do we make technology that works well with our attention? We talk about automating things and using AI, but we don't want to automate hanging out with our kids or watching a sunset or being on vacation. We want to have the technology help us out so that we can make smarter decisions. This is one of my favorite quotes from Mark Weiser. He says, a good tool is invisible. And by invisible, it doesn't mean that the interface is invisible. It means that the tool doesn't intrude on your consciousness. So you're allowed to focus on the task and not the tool. And a book is a really good example of this. If the interface is well enough written, if you have a good enough author, you dissolve right into the book. You don't notice the interface. Also, the interface is very stable. You can spill coffee on it. You can throw it into a bookshelf. It's calm. It just has a spine that tells you what it is. It doesn't overwhelm you every time you walk into a room with pop-ups and alerts. You don't have to plug it into a wall. So let's talk about how we can actually design calm technology. How can we make things calm? Because things are really, really intense right now. Mark Weiser and John Seeley Brown came up with a series of principles, and I expanded on them for the era in which they're in. One of the issues is that Mark Weiser died, and he's no longer with us, and all of the things that he predicted are now here, but their research hasn't been collected from the past and put to today, where it needs to be. So one of the principles is that technology shouldn't require all of our attention, just the attention that it needs to get the point across, and only when necessary. And so an example of this is just a tea kettle. A tea kettle is really straightforward. You set it, you forget it, and it calls to you when it's done. And how it calls to you is important. If you're in a really large house, it can call to you in a loud way. If you're in a small apartment, you can have a tea kettle that calls to you with a quiet tone. But it calls to you, and you're not standing there staring at it. It uses your peripheral attention to let you know what's going on. So this brings me to the next principle, that technology can empower our peripheral attention. We have very high-resolution attention in front of our face. In front of our face, we can have a desktop. We can type, we can pay attention. We can drive with our primary attention. In a car, all of our peripheral attention supports that primary task of driving. We have the rear view window, or the rear view mirror. We have the just touching the pedals. We don't even have to see them. We have secondary information coming in through the windows. We have tertiary information from the radio dials. All of that supports our experience. The problem is that a lot of our technology is made as if the world is a desktop, and it requires all of our attention here. But there's so many other senses that we can use to give us the same amount of information while not taking out our primary focus. So this is an example, a silly example, of the Lumo Back Smart Posture Sensor. This is something you wear around your waist, and then it will let you know when you're slouching, and it will buzz you. And the important thing about a buzz, I can see you guys straightening up right there. The important thing about a buzz is that it's a personal notification. I had an employee who had an insulin pump installed, and he was very excited that he could have 24-hour insulin. But the insulin pump made a noise. And 2 weeks later, we were in a meeting, and he beeped. And I said, "Can you turn that off?" And he said, "Nope. The device manufacturer didn't allow me to change the notification." What does that mean? It means that when he's at a movie theater, when he's at a wedding, when he's at a funeral, he's making beeping noises. People are looking at him thinking he's incredibly rude, and he has no control over the device. It also signals to people that there's something wrong. The other thing is that when he goes to a concert where it's very loud, he can't hear that the insulin pump needs more insulin. And so he could get into a really bad situation. So if a device manufacturer says this is one-size-fits-all notification, it misses out on all of the other edge cases that the person could be in. If you're in an assisted care home and you hear a beep, that's great because you can take care of that person. But if you're trying to be an independent person walking around, you need a personal notification. And something for you is a buzz. A buzz works really well. It uses your peripheral attention to get the point across unambiguously, whether it's loud or not, without annoying other people. It didn't allow him to change it. So he is stuck. He didn't know that when he got that installed. He wasn't given the choice. But if he had known that before, he would have picked a piece of technology that was quiet. Technology should inform while giving you calm. An example of this is a Hue light bulb. This was my old kitchen, connected to a weather report. So we wanted to, in Portland, Oregon, there's very similar weather to here, where it's like rainy and then sunny and all these different things. So what we did is we hooked up a light bulb to a weather report. And so when you walk into your kitchen, you can feel ambiently what the weather's going to be for that day. So if it's dark blue, it will be rain. If it's bright yellow, it will be sun. If it's really hot, it will be bright red. And so I'd be able to walk into my kitchen, feel what the weather would be, and then look at the iPad on the wall and see more details. So you're compressing the feeling of what a thing is into this very low resolution notifier that's just a color. And then if somebody wants to, they can pay their primary attention focus to the thing on the wall to get more information. So this was kind of a fun thing, but it was mostly, we saw these videos that were about somebody waking up in a perfect condo in San Francisco and having this disembodied computer voice tell them the weather report. And we said, is that actually exciting? Because that would be really annoying in real life. Also in those videos, somebody with a perfect San Francisco accent is understood by the machine every single time. And if any of you have tried with any sort of non-San Francisco accent to use voice-activated technology, it puts you on pause and makes you sound like a robot. You say, find me the nearest restaurant. What? You want to find a nearest cow? No, find the nearest restaurant. And it's very difficult because it's not a one-to-one. It's trying to parse something that's difficult to parse. There's just not enough information in the database to make it good. Technology should try to amplify the best of what technology can do and what a human can do. A human is really good at curating something. Technology is really good at managing large data sets. And so when you look at a search engine like Google, what is the purpose of the search engine? It's taking what people have written, real human information, indexing it with robots, and then giving you a set of search results based on your search terms. It's not giving you one result, it's giving you many. It's doing 80–90% of the work for you, gathering those results, ranking those results, and then you're making the executive choice. And without you in the loop with the context and the embodiment as a human, there's no way a computer can ever pick the right decision for you. And so it's really important that you can have a computer help you make a smarter decision, to make you a smarter human. But once it starts to make decisions for you, that's when things can go really wrong. If you've ever been stuck in a parking garage because it's an automated car park and you can't get out, the first thing you want to do is to call a human and have them get you out. Like, there always needs to be, in a completely automated system, humans to override it so that if you get stuck, something can happen. There always needs to be people looking at something. And the more automation happens, the more important customer service becomes. Because those phone trees that don't let you do anything until you press 0 the whole time because you have a more complicated thing than what it gives you as an option are incredibly frustrating. They're dehumanizing. They put you on pause. There are some cases in which automation goes right. So this is my friend Todd Huffman, and he made a robot that scans human tissue. So usually to get human tissue for a biopsy, you get 2 dimensions, and it takes maybe 1.5 years to train a lab researcher to prepare the slide properly and then scan it. And then they have a career of maybe 7 years before their hands start to ache and their vision goes really bad because it's very tedious work. So he said, I'm sick of that. That's a task that should be automated. What can we give to humans to help them make better decisions? So he made a robot that you take a 3-dimensional tissue sample, and it has a diamond knife, and as it slices through the tissue sample, it scans it, and it puts it into a database, and then you have doctors saying, what did it become? Did it become a cancer or not? When did it become a cancer? And then they can start to correlate it and predict based on this 3-dimensional tissue sample that scans in 1,500 times faster than a computer can do it, than a human can do it. It will be able to start to predict faster than humans can alone whether somebody's going to get sick or not and what they will get. This is interesting. I was on a panel at Cannes Creativity Festival last year, and there was this drum magazine, and they said, this is the first artificially intelligent created issue. And I said, if it were entirely AI created, I wouldn't be able to read it. This would be a horrible issue. I said, this isn't true. What did you actually do? And they said, well, we used some AI to give the editors suggestions on what to put in. So make an image this big versus this big. Make a caption with these words instead of these words. Use this font, it's more readable. And at the end, the editors would say, okay, we'll take that advice, that advice, that advice, and they wrote their content, and it became a readable, interesting magazine that had more online readership than before. But it wasn't the AI making the whole magazine. It was just them helping to inform people as to what to do. Has anyone used this sleep cycle app? Yay! So there's a few. So the great thing about this app is that you set it You put it under your pillow, put your phone on airplane mode, and it uses your accelerometer to determine what kind of sleep cycle you're actually in. And then you set an alarm, and it will wake you up in the right sleep cycle. Oftentimes, when your alarm wakes you up, you're in the wrong sleep cycle, and so you're really groggy. But if you could actually, every morning, you actually get this graph. So you can see this is deep sleep, and then there's like a period over here of like 6 a.m. that I should be waking up, and then I'm going back into deep sleep. But my alarm was at like 8:30 a.m., so it woke me up in the right time. I felt refreshed. Over time, I can start to see what was formerly invisible be made visible. I don't need to use this system anymore. I know that my optimum wake time is somewhere around 6 a.m. That consistently, that's how I work. And that I don't need to keep setting these ridiculous alarms and waking me up in the wrong sleep cycle. If I know, and if the machine can help me do that, then I can wake up more optimally, and that's nice. But you learn this as a human. The machine is giving you the information, but the wisdom comes from you looking at something over time and saying, that's interesting. I wonder if I went to bed at this time. There's a new version of this app that allows you to say whether you walked or not, or whether you drank coffee. And it will actually show you over time whether coffee detrimentally affects your sleep or whether running will affect your sleep in a better way. And so you can start to optimize. If I've only walked 3,000 steps before I go to sleep, I know I'll have a bad night of sleep, 15% less sleep quality, in fact. And I know this over just a few months of data. So now I can sleep much better, except last night I didn't sleep very well. Technology can communicate, but it doesn't need to speak. How many of you have heard these really annoying disembodied computer voices? I hate those disembodied computer voices. They're awful. But you don't need to use a disembodied computer voice. And if you use one, you have to translate it into tons of different languages to make it work. It's not usually necessary. The question is, what's the amount of technology necessary to make something work, and no more than that? Because each additional feature is its own support cycle, is its own difficult technical cycle. You get code debt, you get confusion on the team. And the customer is also confused because there's too many things to keep track of. This is an early prototype from Natalie Jembenjenko at Xerox PARC. She was this artist that collaborated with Mark Weiser. And they were talking about a new version of a water cooler that you would hang out with and talk with people around. So this is just a bunch of plastic string attached to our servo motor in the ceiling that's attached to the network at PARC. So whenever anybody was doing anything interesting on the network, this thing would start to whir around, and people would hear it, and they'd show up and they'd say, something interesting is going on. And then they'd gather around it and they'd try to figure out who was doing the interesting thing. And then they'd go from office to office and then they'd learn about something new. It was a way for different groups to talk with each other. And it seems really silly. I mean, it's just a piece of string attached to a motor. But this became like a very important cultural thing at PARC because people were wearing these PARC badges where it kind of tracked their location around the building. And one of the things that was nice is that you could walk into PARC when you went into work in the morning, and because it took your computer 15 minutes to start up back then, it would turn on your computer when you got into the building remotely, and then by the time you got to your desk, your computer would be on and you'd be ready to work. So it's kind of doing something in the background. A more modern version of this is the Roomba robotic vacuum cleaner. When the Roomba is done cleaning, it goes dun-da-da-da, like it's excited to clean the floor. And when it's stuck, it goes dun-dun. That's unambiguous. You don't need to translate that into a bunch of different languages. That's universal. It's happy or sad. If it's sad, it's stuck. You need to help it. It's not doing everything for you. You're helping the machine, and when you're helping the machine, instead of it trying to help you, it becomes adorable. It becomes a non-threatening, fun piece of technology that cats can ride around on in YouTube videos. Plus, it has an unambiguous light sensor. It just shows you whether it needs to be cleaned or whether it's working fine. It's easy to see that, even if you didn't hear the tone. So there's a backup redundant notification system that's also calm as well, that just uses color. You don't need a big display on there telling you the system status. You don't need that much to get this thing to work. And when you ship it around the world, again, no translation needed. It's the same thing everywhere you go. Maybe you translate the manual for how to clean it, but you don't have to worry about people learning how to use it. It's very simple. Technology should consider social norms. This one is really important because I often see people trying to release technology just because it's cool technology or way too soon. It's not that technology isn't ready for us. We as humans take a while to metabolize the technology. We're usually not ready for the tech. When elevators first came out, they had to be artificially slowed down because people were complaining about eardrum pain. They said, this elevator is too fast. So they were artificially slowed down so that we as humans could handle them until we got used to them. And then they got to be a little bit faster. And express elevators have to deal with the inner eardrum pressure too. So let's look at what's normal right now. What's normal right now is completely invisible. All of you in this room have a camera in your pocket, have a video camera in your pocket, have a microphone in your pocket, have a phone. There are so many pieces of technology just crammed in your pocket, and this is the norm. It's not a big deal. We're not afraid that everyone's taking photos of us and denying us our privacy. We use the photo to take a picture of our food before we eat it as a pre-digestive ritual, like no one's privacy is getting eliminated. And the problem with this is that this is what we think is how it is. But 15 years ago, to have a phone in your pocket that had a camera was a big deal. If you go back just 15 years, there were all these articles about the end of privacy because people didn't learn, they didn't know yet, they hadn't created a social ritual of removing your phone from your pocket and taking a photo. And that meant that somebody was taking a photo. You have this much time to run away from somebody who's trying to take a picture. And you know that that's what's being done. But because not everybody had the phone with a camera in it at that time, it took a while. It took a couple years for us to get used to that new device. Every single new feature that comes out that requires a slightly social change will have a metabolism rate, will take a season or a year or two to absorb into our experience of reality. And if it's done wrong, like Google Glass, then it's terrifying because Google Glass was trying to make everybody absorb 15 different features at once in a thing that was in your glasses. The mobile phone had the landline telephone on a cord that you could sit in a room with. People were terrified of that. They thought that everyone would be schizophrenic and sit in their room forever and talk to themselves and never go out again. This was a real concern. I found all these books on it, like when the landline came out. And then we had the cordless phone, and the cordless phone was the first time that you could lose a phone. Like the idea of losing a phone was not a thing. You couldn't lose your phone. And then suddenly it was detached from the house and it was in your pocket. And then suddenly the really annoying ringtones would interrupt everybody. And we had to teach people not to talk on the phone loudly in a restaurant. Not everybody has figured this out yet. You can't just stare at them because they won't even care. And now we have the next step, which is we have phones with all these things in our pockets, but that's invisible, that's absorbed into reality. So let's look at this norm line again. Normal is invisible. Anything below that norm line is restorative. It restores you to the norm. So eyeglasses are restorative. They restore you to what is considered normal vision, and they can even be decorative. It's accepted. Prosthetic legs, they're non-threatening, they're not scary. But anything above that norm line that's not evenly distributed is scary. It's enhancing technology, it's military technology, it's fear-inducing, because not everybody has it yet. And so you have to figure out when you introduce something where it is on that chart and how it's going to affect people and how you can kind of compress it or introduce feature by feature over a 10-year cycle to get it to the place where it needs to go. And that's really hard to do because a lot of the world just wants to say, oh, we'll just release it and it'll be fine. Oh, we'll just release this too. Never mind if the pets die. Like, we haven't thought it through, but it's a cool thing. It would be cool to have. So, yeah, so smartphone, Google Glass. Now, when the Google Glass came out, it was, not everybody had it, you had to pay a lot of money. But when the iPhone came out, it was already an improvement on an existing system. There was $100 that you would pay to get developer tools before it was released, and had very limited features. And so when it actually launched, there were so many people who had built apps already, and like 14-year-olds who made like a fart app, that it was great. It sold itself. I think that the fart app on iPhone was really key to its success early on. key to the success of the App Store because it's easy to spread, it's easy to talk about, and the code is so small that anybody can make a YouTube tutorial for it, and anyone can make it. It just teaches you the features of the phone in one go. Put the audio library in, put the touch library in, put an interface on it, attach a button, attach that to the audio, ding, there's your app. It's amazing, right? But there are so many things that come out that don't do that. They just make these giant jumps. So finally, the right amount of tech is the minimum to solve the problem. Maybe in the 30s and 40s, there were lots of conferences on electrification, new electrical objects like the washer and the dryer and the iron, all these home conveniences. That was the first home technology. That was the first consumer electronics that were connected to electricity for convenience. This was a big deal, but now we use them all the time. It's not a big deal to have a washer or a dryer in your house. This is pretty normal. But then there's stuff that's been built even before that, like streetlights. Super boring technology because we're so used to it. It dissolves into us as we go past it. And when we see a red light, it's like punctuation. We just stop. Or this toilet occupied sign on a plane. It's just a pictogram. It has some colors. You don't need to translate it. It's really boring, but this will be used on every plane because it's the most efficient, low-tech way to tell somebody whether the bathroom is occupied or not from a distance so that nobody's crowding the cabin. This is so boring. That's the problem. When it gets successful, it gets really boring, and then you can't talk about it in an exciting way. Technology should make use of the near and the far. With the PetNet example earlier, it didn't make use of the near or the far. It said, when the server goes down, the animals die. What it should have done is made it so the animals could still exist by defaulting to the offline feeding cycle. Great. So I have this little graph here of what I hope might happen in the future. So we have technology that was far away from us early on in the mainframe era. You had to physically go to the mainframe to get a timeshare. And then we went to the personal computer desktop where we didn't have web access. Everything was stored in our houses with us. We couldn't even conceive of that anymore today. And then we started to have the web and remote mainframes. It's just all stored in the cloud. But I can't go to a server facility that has my Facebook photos in it. And I know where it is. It's like 100 miles away from me in Oregon, like next to a big waterfall for hydroelectric. But I can't go in there. I can't say, hey, my Facebook photos are in here. Can I come in? I mean, I've asked, and they're like, no, this is our stuff. But it's my photos. Well, they're not yours, they're ours. So there's this big issue where I would have stored them on my personal computer. Now they're stored far away, and now they can be messed with. So what I'd like to see happen in the future is we go past this sine wave and we get into the personal server era where we have our data, whether that's health data or whatever it is, and we share that with another entity for the purpose of diagnosis or disease, and then that adds the new information to us, and it's only shared for 24 hours. And the whole point is to dissuade hackers, to make it so that hackers are not incentivized to hack in. Because if they did hack in, they'd only get access to the last 24 hours of data. It's just not as exciting anymore as getting access to 500 million Yahoo accounts. So that could happen in the future. I'd like to ask, if you put your phone on airplane mode right now, how many of those apps are actually usable anymore? Because now we've gone so far in the external direction that we can't do much anymore with the stuff that we have. Yet we have stuff that's more powerful than a mainframe computer in our pockets, and we're not using it. It'd be nice to see more distributed computing. Why do we have to download Game of Thrones on Netflix and have like a petabyte of that being downloaded at the same time? Why can't we share a little bit of it on our devices and have it stitched together so that we share less of that data? Bandwidth is going to become incredibly expensive. And the more you can figure out the least packet size to send, the least amount of time to send it, and the least amount of data, if you can share it and offload it to other people, that's where things have to go, because we'll hit those walls really soon, and the people who are innovative will realize that less is way more. Like having those old video game consoles where you had like 32K of memory and you had to be incredibly clever, those ended up being really good video games because we had to be really unique in how we did something. And right now, you can't even load a page on your mobile phone without like 3 megabytes of JavaScript loading in the browser, and you just want to find the address of a restaurant. This is ridiculous. We're not on a mobile phone network that's like wired connection on a computer. We're on something that's like dial-up, and we expect the same performance as a computer. What if we optimized what we did for mobile in the same way that we optimized old school video games? We would have really fast page loading, and our servers would be way less expensive. And we could do a lot more locally. I hope that happens. I don't know, that's my rant on that. So if good design allows you to accomplish your goals in the least amount of moves, and you keep taking moves away until there's less moves to take away, and you kind of compress things and have like a power tools mode for the people who really like to play with your tech, then calm technology does the same thing, but with the least amount of mental cost. If you can kind of quantify the mental cost and anguish that people are experiencing when they use your technology, then you can start to cut it down and make these smooth interfaces, this calm computing. So I'd like to echo again Mark Weiser in that a person's primary task shouldn't be computing. That's not what we're here for. Unless you're really into computers, in which that's awesome. Like, there's always going to be a bunch of people who are into computers for computers' sake, and those are people who build stuff. But our primary task shouldn't be being computers or computing. It should be being human, right? That's what we're here for. And the scarce resource isn't our technology. We have plenty of it. We're overwhelmed by it. But it will be our attention and how we spend it. And whether all of it's just taken up by mindless clicking on applications and feeds because we're depressed or we really need a nap, but we're looking at this instead of just taking a nap. So thank you. There's this book on calm tech that I just released from O'Reilly, and there's a companion website with a bunch of the original articles that Mark Weiser and John Seeley Brown wrote, and they're so well written and so timely, but they're from like 1995, which makes them even more fantastic. So I would encourage you to check those out. So thank you so much.
It was very good and very sort of insightful, and you stayed awake even if you slept badly in the hotel room. I know. I wonder what sort of digital app you should have used in order to not monitor your non-existent sleep, but instead sort of getting you to sleep.
Well, melatonin, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So the issue is when you use your computer late at night, that blue on the screen inhibits the melatonin production in your brain, and so you end up going to sleep later, and you don't get full REM cycles.
Yeah.
And if you don't get like 3 or 4 during the night, you wake up and your operating system is fragmented, and then you can't do anything.
Or good sort of analog, old school solution, like a couple of bottles of red wine or something.
Yeah. A bunch of rum. You'll
Yeah,
be
exactly,
fine.
that's good.
Yeah, I didn't have either of those.
Hey, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.